Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, we get to see docking in progress, new caves and how we will be travelling through them, info on the future of NPC capital ship combat, and a work in progress first look at the upcoming Reputation Mobiglass app. So this week's Inside Star Citizen begun looking at docking. Now they say they used real-world docking as inspiration and distilled it down into what is important. Apparently it feels very satisfying and easier than they expected thanks to the UI. They pushed forwards the physics grid tech to allow two physics grids to connect together, which was actually in the works but less prioritized. And they've made a new airlock for the Constellation as well, so it doesn't vent the rear engine room if someone is needing to use the Merlin. Now this is where all the components appear to be on this ship. They also worked to improve the transitioning of moving from the Merlin to the Constellation as smooth as possible. So the way that it works at the moment is you target the Constellation just as you would if you were attacking it, and then you press the landing key, which will send a request to dock. That'll open the docking doors and alter the UI to use the new docking alignment HUD. This is obviously if you are the captain. If you are not the captain, when you press the landing button, it will ping the owner of the ship, or they'll get a notification and they can accept it, which will then open the doors for you to dock. Now you do have the choice of auto docking or manual docking, and similarly to landing, you can hold down the key to automatically dock. If you want to do it manually though, this will be quicker and more satisfying, but you'll have to line up the ship using the UI values. Basically using this ring with the three dots to ensure that your X, Y and Z values are all aligned to the constellations. Then as you move closer, you will see a box to help you align the Merlin to the Constellation with the goal of getting the box in the center. Now this is the first version of ship-in-ship spawning to release, and when you go to your ASOP terminal, you can spawn a Constellation and then you can set that Merlin to the Constellation using the Vehicle Manager app on your Mobiglass. Now I'm not sure when they will expand this functionality, but it is the first step and it's a good step in the right direction. For ship-to-station docking, it's quite a different process, but they've tried to keep it as unified as possible. And unfortunately, it will only apply to the Hammerhead and the 890 jump to begin with in 3.13. They didn't explain why, but I think it might be due just to using the 4x2 meter docking collar, as it doesn't appear to work for the 2 meter diameter circular collar. Perhaps that will come later down the line, maybe a 3.14, but they didn't specify. So again, you target the entire station, and then the station will allocate you an appropriate collar, and then once accepted, your HUD will change and you will see the arm animate out to a certain point, and your HUD will guide you to where the arm's final resting place is, so you don't go further. Obviously once you're docked, you will then be able to walk out of the ship and go to the station. They do have a docking port relative mode which allows you to change the view so you can see how aligned you are with the collar, and this is actually the first step to getting landing cameras as well, allowing you to see the ground below, which I think would be a great improvement to landing. In the future, they said that they would like to have a docking management MFD screen, which will allow you to pick the docking port on your ship, as well as other functionality. So it's a shame that ship-to-station docking will only apply to 2 ships to start with, but of course, it'll begin to spread to the rest over time. And it is amazing to finally see this working. It also looks like they've done an incredible job, and I cannot wait to test it out and just see how it feels. So next up, we have a sprint report. It kicked off by looking at the new cave entrances as they continue to explore new caverns and entrances to allow ground vehicles and spaceships to enter. What we are seeing are early designer experimentations used for testing purposes. They use rough debug art to explore the best direction to then decide which ones to take further visual development. Rather than design them to look as good as possible and then decide later on, it just saves a bit of time. Now this particular sprint was to explore various potentials and traversal options for vehicles like the Greycat ROC, which will be necessary to add a variety of mining and mission opportunities for players with dedicated craft to go down into these subterranean levels on moons and planets. They're also exploring creative traversal opportunities for spacecraft where skilled pilots will need to navigate carefully, and they will check in on this again soon. This is coming with 3.13, which is quite exciting. And these caves look incredible. I actually thought it was only going to be new cave entrance types. I never really considered them having to completely design a new interior for all the vehicles to get through. It makes perfect sense when you really think about it, but I'm very much looking forward to exploring these, and I do hope they include some missions to find loot or rare minerals to mine. Next up, we can see a recently completed sprint developing new harvestables found in the Pyro system. Here is the Fotia scrub, which actually relies on solar flares that would otherwise char the planet's surface for its reproduction. We also saw the Pengala, which is a unique plant, highly sought after by plant collectors wanting to cultivate them. And with the final concepts of these two approved, the next step is to move into production and create them so that one day we can find them dotted through the landscapes of the planets and moons. It is very impressive to see these new plants come along, which will include the appropriate lore and likely missions requiring players to travel into the dangers of Pyro to gather them and then safely transport them back to be sold on. Next up, we got to see a new bearing shape charge device in the works. The teams have just completed an art pass on this device, which will be used to breach locked doors for both Squadron and the PU. Very excited to get my hands on that. We also saw some new brands coming to the verse like Tip Top Dumplings and Fish Ringers, who begun life as a beachside snack hut on Cassell, and Pyrotechnic Amalgamated, who are now no longer, but they were the mining company responsible for the discovery of the Pyro system and the abandonment of Ruin Station. As work on colonialism homesteads continues, we got to see some new food props to be found within the social areas of the colonies. These social areas will make the NPC settlements feel alive and lived in, while also serving as mission hubs, drop-off points and meeting points for players. The props team also worked on chairs, tables, lights, control panels, plants, shelves and more, and I'm really impressed with how they take these food props and instead of just going the usual route of what we have here on Earth, they're looking and exploring different types, and I expect there will be lore applied to these as well. They also took a look at ways to revamp some of the kiosks found throughout Stanton system, like these fine kiosks from the Office of Imperial Justice. And finally, we had a quick look at the Reputation Manager, or Repdex, for the Mobiglass. Now this is exploring how we will be able to monitor our reputations with all aspects of the game. We can see it's currently divided into organizations, which are just placeholders. Everything is just placeholders, but think along the lines of Hurston, Covalex, North Rock and so on, and how much affinity you have with them. We can also see on the right hand side the various mission types, like business ranking for trading, hauling and repossessions, military style ranking for policing, escorting and protection, and industrial espionage, so infiltration, intel and sabotage. Again, all placeholders, but still some insight into what to expect for the future. The dossier page is to allow us to access the lore and the detail of everything and everyone in the verse, which will be great for long distance travel. And finally, we got to see the contacts too, which are individual mission givers, your reputation with them and information about them. This is looking pretty amazing and will be great to have some more in-depth info accessible while in game. So as I say, great for while you're traveling long distances, you can have a quick read up on whoever it is you're working for. Anyway, that was a great episode of Inside Star Citizen. Let us move on. So this week's Star Citizen Live was talking all about NPC capital ship combat. The first question was, why do the capital ships not have any interiors? Now there are multiple reasons for this. The first one is they're not needed for the mission, as the players are not required to go inside. Also, performance-wise, right now the servers are at capacity, so not having the interior to spawn in will help somewhat, while they work on the tech to cull ship interiors for players that don't need to see it. It also makes it harder for the players to actually steal the ship, which is something they don't want us to do, and one big reason is spoilers. They are saving the ships for Squadron 42 and don't want to spoil them beforehand with people doing walkthroughs. Next question is, how do capital ships decide on what to shoot? Now, there are two things to factor in. It is size and potential threat. So, for example, the Idris wouldn't waste time trying to hit a fighter with its railgun. Turret gunners would take on fighters, but even they will prioritize an incoming torpedo or missile over a fighter as well. Someone asked whether it's possible to overwhelm the AI targeting, and they say yes, at the moment the AI can get overwhelmed, but they are working to improve on this. Next question is it supposed to be this easy to kill the Idris? Now, they said it's been a very tricky balance, as there are so many variables to consider. They feel the Idris is at a good baseline strength now, but they're not fully capable of defending themselves yet. The devs are learning a lot from what we do and continuing to fix, tune and balance. They do want torpedoes to do a lot of damage, but at the same time, the capital ships need to be able to defend against them. There's a lot of things planned to improve both the balance and the AI, as well as the server performance. Servers are struggling a lot, so the AI targeting torpedoes and firing countermeasures are not really registering properly. But at the same time, if you bring multiple retaliators, they should be capable of taking down a capital ship. So of course, soloing a capital ship should not be possible. Even maybe 5 fighters taking on a capital ship should not be something that is capable of taking it down easily. But bring in bombers and ships that are designed to damage capital ships, then yes. Like they say, lots of tuning and balancing to do, but it's at a great starting point in my opinion, and right now the servers are really just the biggest issue. So someone asked, it appears that capital ships don't fire all their turrets at once. Why don't the AI just focus on one enemy at a time? Now this is more of a balancing thing. Originally they would focus on one target, then move to the next, and then move to the next, which felt very robotic and very AI-like, which is not fun. It made the ship look and behave more like a hive mind. So they want the AI to have their own abilities and variations and not be so robotic. So each turret prioritizes their own targets. Also, there is a difference between pirate capital ship behavior and military capital ship behavior. The military being more well trained, they would have better trigger discipline compared to pirates, who would be more gung-ho. Certain pilots, depending on their helmsman skill, will take different approaches to get better angles, like rolling or turning to get more turrets on target, for example. So it sounds like as they continue to develop the AI traits, skills and behaviors, we will see much more variation to how ships of all sizes engage and fly, but there will be a lot of variations in play depending on whether they are military, pirate, civilian, and so on. Next question is, do the Xenothreat work together? At the moment they say they have the base level fleet behavior, which is pretty much just defend the Idris. In the future they are looking to expand via the use of a captain in control of a battle group who will give orders to prioritize targets, and so on and so forth. And you will actually see all the fighters moving to fulfill these orders. And just like any NPC, captains will have their own unique set of skills, traits and behaviors, and might be indecisive or take longer to give commands, or be completely competent. Now I really love how these will be individually based on each NPC. Rather than just programming the Idris to fly here or there, it'll be an NPC captain who orders the helmsman to navigate to a location, at which point the NPC at the controls will input the same systems that players have to fly the ships. Someone asked whether the capital ships turn too fast, and they say speeds will be tweaked over time. Are the Idris and Javelins the UEE military variants or the eventual player-owned versions? And they are the full military versions from the current time period. Squadron 42's variants might have slightly different exterior arrangements due to their age, and some will have different interior modifications. What's the performance difference between internal playtests versus the live PU servers? Now internally, as you would expect, it is much smoother, like what we see in their B-roll footage. Right now there is a lot of work getting done behind the scenes for iCache, server meshing, and so on that will improve a lot of this. Someone asked, do you account for bad performance with balance and tuning? So they say they balance for where the game will be eventually, and then see what the current issues are, and then make appropriate compromises if they can along the way. Next question, is the current intelligence of the NPC crew where they want it to be? And of course not, but they do have a great foundation to build upon, and they plan next to build on the bridge roles, both for Squadron and the PU. The teams are working on traits right now, so each NPC can have specific values in their behavior, meaning no two crew members will behave the same in a combat scenario. Next question, should we be able to push ships around with our ships, and should ramming be an effective tactic? So they are working to improve what happens with collisions and physics. The physical damage modelling and server improvements will heavily change what happens, which will likely deter a lot of players doing so in the future. They also asked, should NPC capital ships use ramming as a tactic? And this will mostly depend on the traits of the NPC piloting. They may decide to go out in a blaze of glory if they feel like they are going down anyway, and go full ramming speed. Are there plans to provide more capital ship gameplay outside of larger events? And they say yes, destroying capital ships won't be a commonplace objective, but capital ships in missions will be more prevalent. Why don't the size 7 weapons fire more often? And they say it's mostly based on the speed of movement. Size 4 turrets on top of the size 7 turrets, they can track much quicker, so they fire more often, whereas the size 7 turrets take longer to turn and get on target. Again, more AI work will be done to improve their targeting choices. Someone asked if we will see capital ships battling it out in atmosphere in the future, and they say yes, they are capable of atmospheric flight, but it will also depend on the atmosphere of the gravity of each planet and moon and how they fly or fall, of course, so there's a good chance for that in the future. Why do NPC capital ships vanish after missions? Now this is partly due to server performance. The ships actually quantum travel away, but because of the performance it just looks like they disappear. Again, they are working to improve these, as it does look very weird. Someone says that fighting capital ships is like fighting bosses. How will players be rewarded? Now obviously UEC credit payments mostly. They are right now looking into more ways to reward players, be that physical items, perks, reputation perks. Obviously salvaging the wreck as well would yield some bonuses, but I think that once persistent streaming or iCache is fully implemented, hopefully around Q2, we will be able to find unique items or weapons and have them persist, and I think they will make great rewards. The next question is in regards to friendly fire tolerance levels during these events. Now they are looking at this right now. The difficulty is whether things are intentional or not. They are doing stuff at this moment, but they don't want to tell us too much about what they're doing, as people will then try and find edge cases to get around them, but it is an ongoing thing that they are trying to work on. Lots more to come, they say. What strategies would you give to fighting the Idris is the next question. They said bring friends and take out as many of the turrets to open gaps, and then use the bombers to exploit those gaps. Also, they said use up the Idris ship's countermeasures with cheap missiles to make way for torpedoes. They have finite everything and will run out. Also, stay on the rear and avoid the railgun, or even shoot off the railgun. Apparently that's possible. Is targeting and destroying of torpedoes where you want it? Now they say the base system is in place, where the ships can detect incoming ordnance. It's not a guarantee that they can intercept it though, as it will depend on the AI skill level, but this requires players to really work on taking the best approach to give as much chance as possible to landing a torpedo hit. Next question, will the AI fly more cinematically in the future? And they say yes, perfect AI is not what they want, and it is far too robotic at the moment. This will heavily be altered by traits, and some AI will be more show-offy. Next question, you have slowed torpedoes down and made countermeasures more effective. Are you happy with either of these? Now they said they are very much continuing to balance, but they are happy with the current direction, but it is by no means finished. Next question, do you take inspiration from movies or shows? And yes, definitely. The Expanse, Battlestar Galactica and so on. Star Citizen does have more of a Star Wars feel over others, so they are heavily influenced by Star Wars, but ultimately they still want to ensure Star Citizen has its own identity, and personally I think they're doing a great job at creating that. Will there be David versus Goliath moments, maybe small fighters taking out capital ships? Now they say they can definitely see scenes like this happening, but it won't be a common occurrence and will depend heavily on many factors, like the status of the ship at the time that the fighter goes against it. What does it take to get capital ship missiles and torpedoes working? Now this is one of the next improvements they're looking to bring in, is to get capital ships using ordnance working as well as the ships using missile turrets to defend against more agile closing ships. What's preventing capital ships just dominating ship combat? And balance is what they said. They do want the ships to be feared, but there are many of the ships to fight against capital ships. That will come down to really just how they're all working together and of course the balance. What changes do you plan to make based on what you've seen already? So effectiveness of the weapon changes made to big ship weapons will then be applied to all the other ships. Balance, audio, visual effects wise as well. On the mission side, they need to look into the lore edge case improvements, and also how splash damage from missiles should not be giving out crime stats either. I think the biggest issue right now with this event, aside from the server performance, is the crime stat problem, so I'm very happy to hear that they are looking into this. Next question is, what's the next NPC capship system to come online? And this will include ships launching fighters, firing torpedoes, the new damage system, improving capital ship defenses, but also building a full bridge crew with a captain giving orders to weapon officers, who then give orders to turret gunners, and then comms officers may be demanding ships to surrender. So there's quite a lot they're working on. So that was the Star Citizen Live rundown. There's a lot of stuff in the works, and it does look as though CIG have learnt massively what needs improving and balancing. For me, I'm really looking forward to, firstly, the balance, getting things more tuned across the board so that other ships become equally effective and weapons work as intended, but also seeing the AI expand and become more realistic. I've thoroughly enjoyed the Xenothreat event and think that it's a perfect way to test many systems to gather tons of data and information for future improvements and development, all the while giving us, the players, something unique to get on with. With the server work and other back-end improvements coming along, these current issues will be less of a burden and should make these events more consistent and less sort of head meet wall moments. Anyway, that was Star Citizen Live. Let's move on. So also this week, Squadron 42's monthly report was reposted to the Spectrum. I have covered this in a separate video, which is linked in the description below. The roadmap was updated with the inclusion of the weapon content team. My video for coverage of this is also linked in the description below. We have a couple of new events happening right now. One is to celebrate the Lunar New Year, and to celebrate this in-game we have the Red Festival taking place from February the 11th through until the 26th. With CIG hiding red envelopes across landing zones, each with 1,000 United Earth credits inside that can be exchanged at the admin offices. There is also a couple of red ship skins, one for the Nomad and the other for the Freelancer, should you wish to pick one up. To celebrate Valentine's Day, or Coramore, the versus equivalent, you can learn more about this by using the link in the description below to the official post. It also has a few ships on offer should you want to pick anything new up. And finally, there was a new AMA over on Spectrum in which the vehicle experience team answer our questions, of which I will cover in a separate video sometime early next week. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.